Hi everybody, Ryan Barath here. Welcome to my build shop. And one of the things when I'm doing, anytime I'm building golf clubs or helping someone else learn to build golf clubs, is talk about safety. Because when we are building and doing anything, we're dealing with a lot of sharp objects, heat, things of that nature. And a lot of these things, which might seem pretty simple at the time, can actually be pretty dangerous, especially too when you factor in the process at which you're going to use them. So I'm gonna run through some of my favorite pieces of safety gear when I am in my build shop. And the first is, which kind of sounds counterintuitive, is extremely sharp knives. Very similar to a kitchen. When you're in a kitchen and you're moving around, you're trying to cut an object, right? You're trying to cut something up. The sharper the knife, the easier it is to cut through. You don't have to use as much force. And when you don't have to use as much force, you don't have to feel like you're pushing extra hard to achieve the goal of cutting through that thing. Now, in the case of the build shop or anytime you're working with golf clubs, the one thing you're really trying to cut through is grips. And the reason I say this is because when we are re-gripping golf clubs, you're gonna do a lot of them, generally over a pretty short period of time. So you wanna have a sharper knife to be able to achieve this. Because what happens is, and I see this way too often, because one of my favorite tools here is my gripping station. And you'll see people use this. They'll sometimes maybe just do it in a vise with some type of catch tray. I happen to have a full gripping station here for myself. And one of the biggest mistakes, one of the most dangerous ways that anyone can use one of these devices, this is not called a grip removing station. This is a grip installing station, because what ends up happening is if you are using a hook blade and you are cutting, now there are ways that you can attempt to do this safely. I choose not to use this way at all, is people will cut towards themselves. Well, now I've seen people try and get underneath the grip and they get their hand there. Okay, well, first of all, now you're holding a sharp blade basically right against the palm of your hand. Big no-no. And also you're cutting towards yourself. There's nothing more dangerous than trying to cut towards yourself. And if you don't have a sharp knife, what ends up happening is it gets caught. You're trying extra hard to pull through. Maybe you're moving your hand around. Next thing you know, you've cut yourself. And that creates a very, very dangerous situation. So having that sharp knife is very important, because the real way to cut a grip off, which I always think is the most important, is hold it like this in your hand. Puts a lot less stress on your thumb. Little simple trick. And cut away from yourself. It becomes very easy. Sharp blade, old grip, flip it over, do the exact same process again. You're through. Tuck the blade away. Very important. And now, pull the grip off, remove the tape, and you're actually ready to install a grip very, very easily. And that's all achievable because you're using the right tool, which is a sharp knife to go through this process. So there's number one, sharp knives, always really important. Number two, gloves. So the reason I like to have a blue nitride gloves is because if I am building a golf club and I'm gonna shine a bunch of ferrules, well, to do that, I need to use acetone. Acetone can be really rough on your skin, especially if you're using it over a long period of time. So because of that, you have these gloves on. You can do what you need to do to go through this process, and that is get your shop towel nice and saturated. Shine that ferrule up, you can see there. If it's hard enough to eat plastic and eat that type of plastic that's there, probably not really good for your hands, which is why having a glove on is nice and important, especially too if you cut yourself or something like that. It can really dry out your hands, creates a problem down the line. So blue nitride gloves, always a nice thing to have. You can get boxes of them, they're really quite inexpensive. So I say everything's important, but I really do mean that this one is very, very important, because it's probably one of the hard, you can cut yourself, you can heal, all right? But you know, your eyes, okay? Wearing safety glasses is key when you're going through any of this stuff. Whether it be when you're using heat, and it might seem like a pretty innocuous kind of thing that you're doing, and next thing you know, there might be air trapped in something as you are heating it up, and it wants to basically explode. I've seen that with tip weights, when you're pulling a shaft out of a club, and there's an extra tip weight there, it's overheated, there's a lot of pressure built up with inside that epoxy, and it just goes, poof, okay? If something like that ends up in your eye, you can lose your eyesight, basically. Well, I'm sure you're aware of that. You'll lose your eyesight. And look, I like having two eyes, so I like to make sure that you're gonna keep them both, which is why having safety glasses is crucial going through this whole process. Now, another part of the body that you wanna protect is your lungs. Now, if you don't have the option like I do to use an air filtration system, which I have in my shop, wearing some sort of respirator or a mask, if you are cutting indoors and you're cutting a lot of graphite, even steel, you want to be able to protect your lungs. So you hear people all the time, it's like, oh, I don't really worry about it, I'm not doing a lot of stuff. It's like, no, if you're working indoors and you're working with anything that's going to be airborne, breathing any of that stuff in is not good. So having something like that is helpful. And I have over here, and I'm gonna actually cut this golf club in just a second. I'll show you why my dust collection system works. Again, my shop is not big. It is in the basement of my house. I don't want my furnace working overtime, sucking all that stuff in and plowing it through, which is why I have the dust collection system to help go through this process. So whether I am cutting a shaft to put it into a golf club, or I've gone through the process of pulling something out, I need to cut it to a different length, I need to tip a golf shaft, most of the time it's gonna be graphite. I'm going to turn on my dust collection system to make sure that I'm not breathing any of that stuff in. And it also keeps my shop clean as well, because all that stuff airborne is it's just going to end up on everything and creates a mess. So as mentioned, this is my dust collection system. Now I realize right off the top, it doesn't seem like much. All right, yes, it is an old cardboard box, but what's important is the fact that this creates a negative air system. And just like in a chemistry shop, it prevents anything that's in this area from getting out, which would be the dust from either a steel shaft or a graphite shaft when I'm cutting it. So it brings it into, there's an initial filter just inside of the box here, goes down, goes into there. There's a secondary filter on the inside, and then there's the actual bag itself for anything else that happens to get through, which in most cases really doesn't. And it's not too loud, it's not overly expensive. Obviously this is, I would say, a little bit jerry-rigged on my part, but the goal of it keeping dust to a very, very minimum and keeping my lungs healthy, it does that extremely well. So to just showcase to you how it works, I'm going to turn it on. There it is right there. It's just it really works like a big vacuum cleaner. So now when I go to cut, what ends up happening is it all just gets sucked in right there. All the little pieces that are cut from either the tip or the butt end of the golf shaft get caught in a little like tray area here, which I always clean up after the fact. And it's just cut, and you'll see the sparks just fly, and they won't come anywhere near me. Of all of the tools, it's obviously the most expensive item. You can get safety glasses, knives, gloves, all those little things, very inexpensive to have and really helpful when you're going through the process. This, a little bit more expensive, but still under a couple $100 to keep your lungs safe, keep your shop pretty much dust free, and help keep all of that stuff out of the air and away from your lungs. I'm Ryan Barath. Hopefully you found this useful. If you want to see more videos, remember we got the whole fully equipped channel. All the build shop content brings you the ins and outs of how to work on your golf clubs, how to do it safely, and help not just yourself, but other golfers down the line.